Set in a mysterious, imaginative world, Hyper Light Drifter is a game that tells the player almost nothing and asks the player to make discoveries through sheer exploration, both in terms of gameplay, setting, and the story. Abstract diagrams, a vague map, and short still-frame vignettes are all the game provides to guide you through the adventure. It's an approach that has its pros and cons, but in the end, the mystery behind the setting and the genius of the challenging gameplay make Hyper Light Drifter a delightful little adventure. So let's get the super obvious out of the way first, shall we? Hyper Light Drifter is a fantastically beautiful game. It's some of the best pixel art I've ever seen. It looks stunning, and the animation is unbelievable. Just watching 10 seconds of the trailer for the game is a jaw-dropping experience. Much more importantly though, the art direction is so imaginative. There is so much to the world you're exploring. You'll find yourself walking around a quiet, bleak forest and stumble into the head of a defeated colossus, and your mind will just explode with questions. The mystery of what happened, what's going on in the world now, where these colossi came from. It's so tantalizing, and each new area leads to a new environmental set of clues about the world you're exploring. I don't really think the, quote, story, unquote, has an interesting payoff. You don't really learn the origins of the colossi, you don't find out what these crazy dark vision monsters are doing, you don't uncover the mystery of the mysterious purple-faced helmet man. It's a game with a rich lore, but without a clearly told story, and while I thought it was fine leaving the mystery to the imagination of the player, I can understand why some might be off-put by this. Altogether though, the imaginative world combined with this amazing art aesthetic really gel well together to make an immersive experience. Anyway, while you're walking around this imaginative world, you'll find yourself doing battle with a bunch of super interesting monsters and dying a lot. And I have to say that the gameplay of the game might be more interesting than the art aesthetic of the game. Hyper Light Drifter is an incredibly challenging game, and it demands a lot from the player. It leaves very little room for error, and deaths will be frequent. Luckily, the quick respawns allow you to jump right back into the incredible combat system. I love the way combat works in Hyper Light Drifter. You have two primary ways of attacking: close quarters with your sword, and long-range projectiles fired by a gun. Now, the gun has a limited number of shots it can fire before it needs to be recharged, but the gun is charged by hitting enemies with your sword. It makes the combat a balancing act of picking off enemies from a distance and then rushing in close quarters to deal some damage and charge up your gun again before retreating. It requires a lot of strategic thinking as you need to balance your ranged and close quarters combat while dashing around the small arenas, thoughtfully refilling your health and avoiding enemy attacks. Battles in Hyper Light Drifter can be crazy and chaotic as the game loves throwing lots and lots of enemies at you and different enemy types at you all at once. It can be a real challenge, but it's a very fun challenge. The final boss of the game is a particularly challenging balancing act of long-range shots, quick close-quarters attacks, and careful dodging. It's just stellar gameplay. Throughout the game you can earn a number of upgrades for your character, and while I feel like most of the guns you unlock are interesting and valuable upgrades, a lot of the skills you learn are kind of weak. It's very inconsistent. One upgrade lets you charge up your sword attack, but most of the enemies in the game are designed to move quick and attack quicker, so it's rarely ever useful to stand and charge your sword. You can upgrade your dash to do multiple dashes in a row as well, but executing these dashes is extremely unwieldy. While I did get used to it more late in the game, there were still far too many late game encounters that ended in death because the character didn't dash twice when I wanted them to. You can also get a shield for your dash that soaks up projectiles and charges up your gun, which is super useful, but even more inconsistent than the multiple dash. Even after finishing the game, I still never felt like I got the timing of the dash shield down. The weak and finicky upgrades didn't ruin the combat system, but they didn't richen the combat as much as they could have. One other thing about the game that kind of bothered me was just a lack of consistent rules between the zones you encounter. In summary, the goal of each zone is to find 4 pink triangles, defeat the boss of the zone, and raise the pillar, all while looking out for yellow experience tabs for your upgrades. Now, in one area of the game, there are very few experience tabs to find. I collected 2 the entire zone, so when I saw a boss drop 3, I thought it was just a huge jackpot. But then the next zone I encountered, experience tabs were just thrown at me left and right. Seriously, in one zone, I gained 2 experience points and a pink triangle in the first 2 minutes of walking around the area. Another example is in one area, I found 3 triangle pieces, fought the boss, and then found the 4th triangle piece after the boss encounter. Then in the next area, I found 3 triangle pieces, fought the boss, and then found out the last triangle piece was not past the boss and it was actually way earlier in the area. And as another example of inconsistency, there's one zone that doesn't even have one real final boss, but a series of mini-bosses. It just lacks consistency, and personally I think that in a game where you can tackle areas in whatever order you choose, a consistent rule set is necessary. You don't need to make each area have the exact same puzzle or the exact same layout or anything, but for example, giving me no experience tabs in one area and then throwing a bunch at me in the next area is just kind of jarring. It's not so jarring that it ruined my experience with the game though, it's still a fantastic game. So, should you play Hyper Light Drifter? The answer is yes. It's a beautiful and challenging game with an amazing art direction, a mysterious, imaginative environment, and a killer combat system. I have some minor gripes with the game: the lack of a story payoff for the mysterious world, the kind of weak upgrade system, and some inconsistencies with the zone designs. But Hyper Light Drifter is still an incredible game, well worth playing if you want a fun, satisfyingly challenging game. That's it for me today. Thank you so much for watching. This has been PaperTony, and I'll see you next time.